All right. Good morning, everyone. So this is our lesson for this morning. It's all about chapter 5, summary, conclusion, and recommendation. Our target objective for this morning is all about defining and determining the purposes of summary, conclusion, and recommendation. Differentiate how summary, conclusion, and recommendations work together, and display example for summary, conclusions, and recommendations. So, for informative meaning, when we say summary, it is a brief, organized presentations of the most important findings, ideas, experiences, and theme gathered from particular responses or other qualitative data. So, meaning to say, this is served to be the main juice. This is served to be the main juices of what is supposedly going to be expected from the interpreted theme in the thematic analysis. And then it does not include area responses. Instead, it condenses the data while preserving the main meaning. So basically, we are talking about what does it mean, or what came out of the findings of the interpretations pointed out and indicated under the theme column. And it is a concise, objective condensations of the core findings, major theme and patterns derived from non-numerical data such as interview observation, transcript, focus group discussion, and documentary analysis. So these are some of the common findings that we are actually looking forward when we are framing down the table intended for transcription or for thematic analysis, containing the participants' responses, the code, the category, and also the theme. Next, we also have these purposes of summary. Why we're conducting a summary? Basically, the main purpose under the qualitative research is for the researcher to be able to get the main findings clearly and correctly, to be able to identify the common experiences or ideas of the participants involved in the study and highlight important themes and patterns as well. Give readers a quick understanding of what the participants said. So, obviously, whatever themes that you put together under the last column of the thematic analysis, when you interpreted them all, the findings there for the interpretation will serve to be the summary of the study. The major findings of the interpretations that you put together fall under the theme. These are all covered under the summary. It gives reader a quick understanding of what the participant said and serve as a basis for the conclusion and recommendation. Okay, this is a concrete example for a summary. First, we have the research topic, for example, flood experiences among residents of Barangay Sulao. Suppose the researcher interviewed 10 residents and the responses show several recurring ideas. And then these recurring ideas serve to be flooding frequently damages household belongings. Residents experience difficulty going to work and school. Some families temporarily evacuate to safer places, and flooding causes stress and anxiety. And residents rely on neighbors, relatives for assistance. So these are all covered under the theme, which basically the totality of what is going to be expected from the other column intended for thematic analysis, such as participants' responses, the codes, and also the category, and the last one, which is the totality, is under the theme. So this is now a concrete example for the summary. Relying on the previous slide, we have the summary of findings. This finding shows that the residents of Barangay Maysulao experienced several challenges during the severe flooding, and the most common problem include damage to household belongings, difficulty in accessing work and school, temporary evacuations, and emotional stress. Despite these challenges, residents demonstrate cooperation by helping one another during floods. Overall, flooding affects not only the residents' properties but also their daily activities, emotional well being, and common life. So basically, this is the concrete example intended for the summary that we took up from the theme and the interpretation as we put them together. That is the interpretations. When you put them together, it will create a major findings, and that major findings that will serves to be the summary of the study. Okay, next we're having this what you call conclusion. The conclusion, objectively, is the final interpretations of the study and findings. It explains what the researcher learned from the participants' experiences, perceptions, or responses, and directly answered the research questions. In here, you are talking about what meaningful findings that you can actually pick out from the major findings under the summary. What is that significant findings that you can pick out from there, and from that you will be writing down in the conclusion what was that meaningful and what was that significant finding arises from the major findings under the thematic analysis. The final synthesis also of the study or central theme and meaning that explain the broader significance of the findings. This is an overall answer to the research problem because it's in this part where you are now beginning to conclude what happened from the time you started involving yourself in the study, what result that came out based from the thematic patterns, a theme, the interpretation, followed by the summary, this is the major findings, and then from the major findings, you try to determine and detect which of these major findings which you think considered meaningful and significant findings, where the result serves to be the common overall works of the study. Okay, let's try to see what are these other purposes that are being governed in the conclusion. It moves beyond a simple summary of text or interview to interpret the core insight derived from subjective human experiences. That synthesis, it shows the reader why the living experience of social pattern uncovered in the study matter. And it connects the final insight back to the original research question without adding new data. So basically, we are actually moving beyond the summary. That's why I was telling a while ago. It talks about those significant findings. It seems to be the final judgment or the final verdict of the study. So it's just like a way of saying this is it. Okay, okay, and it shows also basically here as one of the purpose that reader it shows the reader why living experience or social pattern uncovered in the study matter, because it is going to be brought out. Those experiences are going to be exposed and be revealed publicly or in a certain locality for this study. Or sometimes it may not be revealed completely because we're also considering the confidentiality if the concerned person or involved participants do not wish to do that, to disclose their identity. That is we should have to respect that kind of requests, as we were able to get the sources from them or the data from them. Okay, so let's try to see the concrete example or other characteristics that may be relying on their conclusion. It is a qualitative research. A qualitative research or conclusion should summarize major findings without repeating all the details. Answer the research questions, interpret the meaning of the findings, be based only on the data gathered from the participants, and avoid introducing completely new information. Of course, as you go with the as you identify the major findings, the next thing that you're going to do here is trying to get the core, the meaningful and the significant findings that you were able to take out from the theme. And then from there, you were able to determine what's the answer for the research questions that you laid down in the statement of the problem as you go through in the study. And then you will be able to interpret the meanings of the significant findings as well, and all the data gathered from the participants should probably based from the study being conducted, and you're not going to introduce any other non-related information. uh, Not all, it's only your topic where you will be able to establish and develop for you to be able to find the answer. Okay, this is a concrete example. Suppose you are interviewing a residents and identify this theme, okay? Disruptions of daily activities, loss of income, community cooperations by any end, fear and emotional disabilities or distress. So, example of conclusions. So, you think these are the most meaningful and significant findings that were pervading in the study as you went through for this. The study concludes that severe flooding significantly affect the lives of residents in Missoula, particularly their daily activities, livelihood, property, and emotional well-being. The participants' experience reveal the participants' experiences reveal that flooding creates fear and uncertainty, especially when homes and sources of income are threatened. However, the findings also show that residents demonstrate resilience through cooperations, mutual assistance, and biennial during and after flooding. Overall, flooding is not only an environmental problem but also a social and economic challenges that requires a stronger preparedness, community support, and appropriate disaster response measure. So basically, this sample is actually relying from the summary of the study, summary of findings, and from the summary of findings, relying on the theme uh, from the interpretations that pointed out by the researcher when they put together and organized together all those theme that they put on the latter part column of the table, getting the totality of, as I was saying, the participants' responses, the code, and the category. Okay, so it goes that way. All right. Okay, let's proceed. That's for conclusion. And the third one is recommendation. Again, informatively, it is a part of the study where the researcher suggests practical actions, improvement, or future directions based on the findings. Since qualitative research often explore experiences, perceptions, and meanings, recommendations usually focus on how the insight can be applied in real world contexts, such as improving policies, programs, teaching methods, or further research. A set of suggested action, solution, or improvement also based on the findings and conclusions of the study. It answers the questions what should be done based on what the researcher discovered, and should be realistic, specific, directly connected to the findings. They may be addressed to the community, school, local government, organization, future researcher, or other stakeholders. So in here, you will be suggesting some possible recommendations that is not far behind from the result of of the study, and you can find that in the conclusions, because it's in the conclusions where the recommendations are relying on. So you might be giving suggestion. Then the suggestions should be based on reality. It's not only a matter of way of thinking it, or sometimes you tend to become futuristic because based on the gathered informations that you had in your study. It may also be a way of giving uh, suggestions, what's supposed to be done for the findings that came out in this study. Let's try to deal with the purposes of recommendations. Why recommendation is actually conducted. The purposes of recommendation is to be able to determine the rooted firmly in the pattern themes and narrative uncovered during qualitative data analysis, and those are the evidence-based result. It sometimes or it offers clear practical steps that a specific group or decision making should take, and those are actionable. It answers the reader questions of what comes next after understanding the study's conclusion, and that is forward looking. So the purposes may dwell with the three functions: the evidence based, the actionable, and the forward looking. Forward looking. The evidence base is not only a matter of including all the shared experiences and primary informations that you got uh, from your participants in the study, but also those backups that you think it has something to do with the subject that you were able to develop, and those are related to study conducted by the other contributors or authors. And then we also have this actionable. If there are themes, there are interpretations, there are major findings, there are significant and meaningful findings that you were able to identify in the study, the next thing that you're going to do is to take an action, to make suggestions what should be done for that kind of findings that you were able to find to discover. And these findings may either be positive, may either be negative. Okay, although the findings turn out to be positive, it's still it turns out it also need a recommendations. For example, a future study will do to be able to establish much more the study. And then the last one is the forward looking. This is what I was telling. This is one of the things that I was telling a while ago. It's some kind of a futuristic way, futuristic manner, where you will be looking forward for the study. It doesn't necessarily mean that you will always be uh, after with thinking positively because the study turned out to be successful. Sometimes, or yes, sometimes it goes through with the process, even though the study turns out to have a successful findings. You still need to recommend suggestions on what is going to be suggested, what is going to be recommended for this study. Okay, let's continue. There are types of recommendations that you need to understand for this. We have recommendation for practice, where it suggests real world behavioral or operational changes for professional, educators, or communities based on participants. So you are actually recommending based on what is being found out in the study, because this is the result, this is the findings that came out. All right. So it's just something that is really objective and informative. And then the other one is recommendations for policy. Uh, Policy in a sense that, for example, there are some kind of existing policies or not existing policies that are not present in our time, and these are going to be implemented. For example, what are those policies in the local government, in the national government, that are that are being cascaded to some local municipalities, barangays, and the rest. So you can probably go into this kind of recommendations or even launching of programs and projects to be able to avoid such kind of problem, seemingly or similarly the same as this one. So these should be laying down or lying down with some kinds of recommending policy existing in the locality, in the barangay, in the municipality, in the provinces, or even in national aspect. And then the last one is recommendation for future research. So for those researcher who wish to become an effective researcher in the future and would want to dig more about their study, uh, so if there are part in the study of the researchers presently, won't they think part of their work did not make successfully part of their work, they probably recommend for future researcher to have to further study that part of their work that they haven't uh, felt took that they haven't felt it took them more successfully. So they're suggesting that if there are other researchers who might be engaging into the same study, they're recommending that part to give more or to be more focused on this particular aspect of their study that they were not able to develop in the time they were doing the process of this study or this research title. Okay, let's proceed. The next one, we have this example for recommendation. So the findings here is the summary of findings. So a resident reported that prolonged flooding causes difficulty in transportation, loss of income, damage to household belongings, and stress among families. And then in the conclusion, prolonged flooding significantly disrupt the daily lives and livelihood of residents and creates emotional and economic difficulties. The researcher recommend that the barangay government strengthen its flood preparedness and early warning system, establish accessible evacuation area, and provide livelihoods assistance to affected families. Residents are also encouraged to participate in disaster preparedness activities and maintain emergency kit. So, this is an example of recommendations from the findings, summary of findings that came out from the table in the thematic analysis for your chapter 4. And then this chapter 5 covering the summary, the conclusion, and the recommendation in general. Okay, so these are the references I was looking over as I was writing and preparing this slide for the class. I hope I was able to share part of this study that you may probably use for your chapter 5. And then this is the last one. Thank you so much. I hope I was giving you some kind of enlightenment concerning your chapter 5. Your chapter 5 may not be able to produce unless you don't have your chapter 4. So make sure that you would have with you with your chapter 4, which is basically the totality of the gathered primary data from your uh, participants' responses, which is the transcription. Okay, so thank you for watching and listening, and have a nice day ahead.